Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Beth Dooley. I'm in Minneapolis, and I'm a cookbook author and food writer. And I love the idea of this panel because I get to talk to people that with whom I have relationships that are doing allied work, but aren't necessarily writers and necessarily home cooks, although we all share the same passion around this. And the last 40 years almost, I've been writing about food. So I've seen a lot of wonderful changes in soil to palate, over those years. So with that, I'm going to introduce Linda.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Michelle, for pulling this together and really starting the idea. It's great to meet everyone, and great to meet you, Beth, and see everyone I work with here. My name is Linda Hetzel, and I have Prairie Birthday Farm, which I started in 1993 during a transition period from teaching nursing practice at a university to motherhood, and then wanting to produce really nutrient-dense food for my children. And that morphed into a business concept and regeneration of 14 acres in a diverse polyculture kind of model. So I don't have rows of anything. And I've been fortunate for since 2003 to be selling extra produce and herbs, fruits, edible flowers, foraged items, all from the 14 acres to chefs and individuals. Just north of Kansas City is my location. Thank you.
Wonderful, great.
And I'll give a shout out to Taylor.
Thank you, Linda. Hi, I'm Taylor Neff. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm an arborist full-time, so I work with trees, but then in addition to that, I am an apprentice with Linda at her farm. So I kind of got into gardening, which led me to sustainable agriculture, which led me to Linda, which is it's like a totally different version of food cultivation. So sounds dramatic, but it has changed my life. So we can talk more about that as we go. But yeah, nice to be here. Thank you.
Call out somebody.
Yeah, Rick. Yeah.
Rick.
Hey, that makes sense. My name is Rick Rollins. I'm a chef from Kansas City, Missouri. I got into cooking just really randomly without any real intent. It became something a little bit more than that. In particular, meeting people like Linda, it helped me become who I am now. And I say that because, we have an extremely high focus on locally sourced items. About 90% of everything that we have in this kitchen is locally sourced. We also have a heavy focus on natives and foods that are grown wild here. And so that's kind of our story. We pretend to be more of a fine dining kind of concept here at Cafe Sebastian. But really we just come to work and cook and have fun, and however things turn out, they turn out. So that's kind of my story.
Great. We got a great question from Barbara, who's on Zoom. And she's in Paris right now. So we're not in Paris, we should be. And can you share a time when sharing your story with someone had a direct impact on their vision of our food system? And so, Rick, do you want to start with that? Because you're actually having people experience it firsthand when they taste it, right? Can you share something?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a daily thing. Our guests come in, and a lot of times it's weird. They're weirdly intimidated by the menu, even though our menu is fairly simple. I think they're more intimidated by the idea of ingredients that they're not familiar with. And that's always, I'm the type of cook, chef, I prefer cook, that I like to spend time in the dining room speaking with people. And so every opportunity I get, I share, with people, new ingredients, local ingredients, wild ingredients. And that, I don't know, it's kind of become one of my things that I do pretty regularly. And it makes people a lot more comfortable with that with the menu, but also, there's been quite a few people that have reached out to me after dining here that have said, hey, I've found myself in the woods and I've found these certain items and I found these wild, foods, or, hey, we tried something at your restaurant and now it's regularly in the rotation of what the food that we cook at home. And, stuff like that. And then also just my chefs that work with me, being able to expose them to new ingredients has pushed them creatively to a whole different level than they were when we started working together. So every little bit, every new ingredient and everything counts for something on our end. So it creates a special bond between us, our guests, and one another in the kitchen.
That's awesome. I love that. That's great. How about you, Taylor?
I was thinking you would call me out next. Yeah, I tossed around a couple of thoughts on it. I mean, obviously it's not my story, but Linda sharing, really just going to her space and seeing that polyculture system and how it's Prairie Birthday Farm. And sometimes you get an idea in your head when you hear farm, but it's not like that. It's like a collection of nutrient dense native plants, edible plants. And, I go to her farm on Friday, so I'm there on harvest days when we have to get stuff ready to take to Rick. And
Nice.
so I've learned how I can find food in my yard outside of my garden beds. Like I have chickweed and henbit and creeping Charlie and lamb's quarters and all of these things that can help sustain me really in a healthy, nutrient dense way, without any effort and without intense cultivation. So that's just like one of the ways that my life has improved immensely from getting in touch with these plants.
Yeah, that's great. And Linda, I mean, you've got so much to share. Can you talk about that? Because you really had, in your career change and stuff too. People must have been like, wow, what's she doing now, right?
Right. I early on got a lot of questions about when I was going to go back to work. Wait a minute, this is the hardest job I've ever had. Well, we're talking about relationships today, and boy, it's all about relationships. It's the relationship with me, with the soil, and all the amazing organisms and creatures and plants that do all the work to sustain us on the planet, that I'm really just hosting here and stewarding for the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had the good fortune to be able to share that work with people who come as apprentices and just as tours. And I've had chefs and their staffs out for years because I want, tableside is the best place for ambassadors of my work to be, because they get to talk about what I do to the customer. But it's also about helping, leaving a legacy. I don't want to take all that I've learned with me. That's just nuts. What a waste of my life minutes to not make sure I pass it on to someone. And one of my tour points I speak with, I demonstrate the Concord grapevines I got from my uncle, who used to truck farm outside of St. Louis in the 50s. And he asked me once when I was in there visiting him if I wanted grapevines. I said, sure. And he disappeared behind his house and brought out mine, said, here, stick these in the ground, they'll grow. And of course they did. And of course I cannot reproduce that experience. I've tried many times. And so I encourage people, I'm mad at me because I didn't say, wait a minute, take me with you, show me what you're going to do. And I'm mad at him because he didn't say, here, come with me, you need to learn this, So I share that story with all my tour guests. And I had an artist actually go back to Indianapolis and learn how to do wild persimmon pudding with her grandmother because of that story, and then brought a sample of it back to me. So in terms of how far the reach is, it's pretty far.
Yeah.
And so I encourage everyone to learn from elders. It doesn't have to be a relative, but any elder in their space. Pick their brains, work alongside of them. Don't let them take all that information with them.
Well, and I would think that for somebody who's been in the medical profession, the more conventional medical profession, to know that you're still involved in healing must be satisfying as well, and that you're sharing that knowledge. That's great.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so, and Linda, you've sort of begun to answer this question, so I'm going to circle back to you with this. How, talk a little more about those relationships, about how you've cultivated those relationships, and how, again, you've connected with cooks that are sharing this food and probably telling stories of where their food comes from, right? Not only chefs like Rick, but also home cooks that are, delighted that they have a story to tell when they sit down at the table and they've made something with your food. Can you share a few more of those stories? Because I think that's how those relationships grow, right? It's probably brought
Right.
people to your farm.
Right. Sure. So initially, I didn't have a customer base. And as my two sons got old enough to not need me at home every day, I actually began by doing cold calls with my wild fruits.
Wow.
And I just go to chefs and with pawpaw or wild persimmon or wild plum and say, could you use this? And, the response was usually, yes, oh my, because the flavor is so amazing, because all my things are tree ripened. So I capture my fruit in drop cloths underneath the trees. So I'm not harvesting things underripe so I can ship them. So it's a really small scale local model. They wouldn't last. In fact, I provided fruit for a CSA, and the response from the recipients was, we have to eat your stuff right away. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's true. Yes, you have to eat it. It's ripe right now. It won't last in your refrigerator for 4 weeks. But that means that the nutrients and the flavor are really at their peak. And I'm glad you talked about the healing aspect of it, because as a nurse at bedside, of course, one of the most frustrating things is once people get there, sometimes it's too late, or they've already started down a disease pathway that will take them a long time to recover from. So really, I say plants are health. They're really what sustain us. If we wait for plants as medicine, that's a little cart before the horse kind of problem, but I would also, pun to Rick about how we met and what is shared in the community of cooks about local producers. How does your relationship with other cooks help build relationships with farmers? Because I think I'm getting referrals from cooks and chefs around the city.
See, I love hearing that, because Rick, I'm just going to jump in and say, I give you so much credit, because there's so many chefs that say, nah, this is too hard. I'd rather have it all come with one delivery from Sodexo or Bix or whoever it happens to be. So can you talk about how you've been able to be a little more nimble and responsive to getting this really good food into your kitchen? Because that takes more time and it takes more work.
It takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more work. I mean, I could definitely just go online and order a bunch of garbage from a company that's, getting apples that are just hard as a rock and, things that don't make sense. Yeah. It does take a lot of work. I'll be honest with you, my circle of people that are involved in the restaurant industry is rather small. And that's by design. Like I intentionally avoid the lifestyle of the restaurant industry and all that stuff. So my communication with chefs is truly only the chefs that I am really that interested in, and chefs that I think are a little bit younger and have a little bit more, or a little bit more interested in learning. There's a lot of people out there that are just used to what they have. That's how they operate. And they don't really want to step out of those boundaries, out of those comfort zones, because it is such a difficult industry and the margins are very slim. So room for error is, you know, you don't have a lot of it. So while part of me is a little bit sympathetic to that, you know, at the same time, I also think it is a little bit of laziness. And I think that it's more excuses maybe sometimes that people don't want to like use these ingredients and try new things. So I guess it's worth the work to me. It's worth the extra effort. I spend a lot of time finding farmers and, you know, cultivating these relationships and trying to nurture them into something more than just, you know, I buy stuff from you. Like I want to have a personal relationship. Linda and I have a very good relationship. I call Linda my friend before I call Linda a grower or a farmer or anything of that nature, even though that is what she does. She's a friend to me. And building that friendship has created a lot of opportunity for me to learn a lot more about ingredients that I never would have known about. You know, it gave me the opportunity to learn about the nutrients of ingredients. When I started cooking, I did not care about that. That was like the least of my concerns. I was, you know, I want to get awards. I want to do this. I want to do that. And the less that came in, the less that was important to me, the more understanding the ingredients became important to me. Having growers like Linda, you know, it makes my job a little bit easier because she provides so much information and she loves what she does so much that you catch that vibe and you roll with it, you know, and I don't know, it kind of makes it a little bit easier for me. But just that, you know, being able to have someone to help me understand ingredients, it changes everything, you know. And if people took a little bit more time to do that, I think you'd see a lot more people using ingredients like wild plums or persimmons and pawpaws, things like that seem super foreign to people, but really, I mean, it's in our backyard, you know. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I think that answers your question.
It does. Well, and I mean, I think one of the really nice things about that is that your enthusiasm, you know, her sharing her enthusiasm and information with you then allows you to share that same information with your cooks and, you know, your servers, who are then sharing that information with their customers, which brings us to, you know, what they do when they go to the grocery store or go to the co-op or to the farmer's market, right? Because they have a deeper understanding. So you're really kind of pulling everything through. So yeah, no, it makes total sense. You know, and Taylor, so, you know, I'm curious because, you know, you're certainly younger than I am. And, you know, I'm curious about Linda's, you know, take on legacy. What inspired you to get involved in this work? Because certainly, you know, you have lots of other options, and becoming an arborist is a really interesting kind of take on this work, because trees are so important to permaculture and to our landscape and everything else. So I'm curious, did it start with beauty? Did you have a tree that you loved in your backyard? What's your relationship?
Yeah, so it is fun because I'm an arborist, so the trees are my thing, but then I've also, you know, outside of my career, have sought out learning about food and how to grow food. So like now that I've been introduced to agroforestry, I didn't know what that was a few years ago. Now it's combining both of them. So it's great. So I guess it's kind of two separate paths that took me to trees and food. I got my degree in PR and ended up running an after school program for a while. And it was in a low income community in Kansas. And if you're in a low income school, then the kids, we didn't get a snack budget. We had to use the snacks from the food pantry. So it was a lot of prepackaged cheeses and bean dips and cans and meat sticks and stuff. And my kids were between the ages of 5 and 10, but they just threw a fit. And they wrote letters to the people who did the budgeting for our program and said, hey, we can't just eat only this. So they ended up getting a budget so I could go buy them fresh produce to go with their snack. Making a long story shorter, eventually they wanted to build garden beds outside of the school. So we did that, and then we started growing radishes and lettuces, and they got to eat those for snack. And then they also did tasting Tuesdays, and they introduced those things to the rest of the kids in the school. And that was like kind of when I started getting to like into like, I want to, you know, cultivate my own food. And it just kind of evolved from there. My dad is a farmer. So I was introduced to conventional growing up, going to the farm every weekend, all growing up. So I didn't have a lens on food or farming, like nothing near what we're talking about now. So it is really exciting. And now actually I'm having like these conversations with my dad, who's, you know, in corn and soybeans, and he texted me on New Year's Day this year and said, hey, my resolution going forward is to start managing my land so it's good for environment and ecology, in addition to the economics. And I had to call Linda and read it aloud. And I was like, Linda.
Awesome. That's incredible. What a great story. So do you know what he's going to plant? Do you know what his rotations are going to be?
Well, we're going to start with just doing some forest management in the wooded areas and expanding and making a grassland area between the transition between the fields and the forest, protecting the creek that runs through it, and incorporating some oak species and kind of reinvigorating the prairie strips that are in the terraces for starters. But we're actually going to visit someone that Linda introduced us to, who's doing chestnuts and sheep.
Oh,
so
awesome.
My dad said in March that he wants to go check that out. So baby steps, but still.
You know what, that's so exciting, because think of the impact that will have on other conventional farmers, because they're not going to listen to me, this little cookbook writer living in Minneapolis, like, oh, she's cute.
Yeah,
but
and my dad's not going to listen to me.
Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, that's really cool. And
what others are doing.
Yeah, let me know when those chestnuts get going, because I am such a fan of chestnuts. You know, they're a remarkable food, and they're a beautiful, beautiful tree, right? You should say, tell us about, tell the group about chestnuts, because I've seen them. Do you know where, what farm are you going to
Linda, does he have a name of his farm?
I've seen two, but it's the Payne family farm.
Okay.
And it's in, it's west
Concordia, Missouri.
Concordia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So because chestnut trees grow to be like 20 feet tall, right? And they have a gorgeous canopy.
Yeah, at least. I think they can get a little taller than that. I visited a chestnut and pawpaw, an agroforestry farm in Iowa, and they had some mature ones, and they said they've never had an issue having a market for them. I planted a few in my yard just last year, so it'll be years before they produce. And when I went and visited that farm, he was like, "You're gonna regret that so much when they actually produce, because they have those spiky burrs, But
do you know if they're the Americanoid chestnut, the back crossed? I'm just curious.
Actually, Linda has an American chestnut that's young at her place. I planted Chinese chestnuts, and they have developed hybrids now that are available. So it would be cool to.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the one, they're the Americanoid, not the, because we have, the other ones have all died out, right? With the
right. Yep.
But this is the one that's been back crossed to be, both the light resistant and also as tall. And the nuts they're fabulous. The nuts are amazing. Yeah. Is that what you're growing, Linda?
No, I actually donated to the American Chestnut Foundation.
Did you? Yeah.
And he's propagating nuts from a source in the Missouri Ozarks that was kind of isolated. So theoretically is the American.
Is it the original American tree?
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah.
It may just grow to 10 feet and then die, because the Chinese chestnut blight is everywhere. So we'll see if I can coax it to production, but it's a very long shot.
Yeah. Well, it'll be wonderful. I'm just, again, the American chestnut story is such an interesting story. And, to everybody's point, sharing the stories of what it takes to get this food back on the land and how good it is for the land, I think is really important. And so the work that Taylor's dad is doing, is going to influence more conventional farmers. The work that Linda's doing is going to, inform, chefs, and the work that Rick is doing is going to inform home cooks. And, one of the things I do is share recipes so that people know what the heck to do with this food when they bring it into the kitchen, because maybe they'll taste it at Rick's, from Linda's farm, or, eventually the chestnuts from Taylor's dad's farm. But then they sort of get stumped. So that's one more way to cultivate those relationships, because at the end of the day, there's so many people that don't grow their own food, like me, but that are really curious and want to be part of these solutions, right? And so that's kind of the lane that I bicycle in, is just sharing the recipes and the stories too, because I do think people are going to be more inclined to try something new if they understand why. If they understand that the flavor is going to be different, or they understand there are more nutrients in it, or they understand it's going to have an impact on the land, or if they understand that it's healthier for them. I think I think one of the things that we're seeing happening is that a number of people that have always sort of thought about local food or heard about local food, or are now becoming familiar with terms like regenerative agriculture, don't A, understand what it is, and B, don't appreciate the importance of their role in bringing it into the kitchen so that we can kind of grow this out. So it's really interesting. I sort of play at the very end of the food chain in sharing that information.
What's funny, Beth, and you saying that is I have your cookbook and your cookbook with Sean Sherman, and then I have a cookbook called Cooking Wild in Missouri. And so I keep those up on a shelf in my kitchen, and I will bring those out to show people who have no idea what those foods are, what those ingredients are. So it's backwards, right? So you're saying people have ingredients, I'll show them how to eat. But I take your cookbook and I say, look at these meals. Guess what? Half of this stuff is in our yards.
Wow,
So
that's great. That's wonderful, Taylor. Thank you. Well, that's the other thing too. People realize, that they're walking over so much food every day just without paying attention to it. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I think that's the other thing that this whole interest in the interest that's being raised on farms and in restaurant kitchens, and Taylor, with the work you're doing with your, on your family's farm, as well as with Linda, and, the work that Indigenous people are doing around paying attention really to what's growing around us, right? Because it's just, and I taught Montessori school for a while, and the whole focus of Montessori is on experiential education and understanding how important those sensorial clues are to our receiving information, right? And food kind of covers all of those things. It's taste, it's scent, it's texture, right? It's color. So in terms of creativity, it provides a whole palette of opportunities in a pretty significant way. And I'm hoping more than anything that, as your school put gardens in so kids could experience that, what an impact that's going to have on those kids. Because it also, and Michael Pollan has written about this, it also empowers people in a pretty significant way. If you can grow your own food, or at least know how to grow your own food, or have an idea of how food is grown, and then know what to do with it, you really become self-sufficient. And then maybe you feel less swayed by what's going on in the rest of the world, right? Maybe more of an independent thinker. And have you guys found that in the work that you're doing now, when are you seeing a change in how people relate to each other or to the food? I'm just curious. Do you have stories about that?
Or I'd like to bring in real quick what we had talked about in like our initial conversation, the phenology of cooking.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and maybe if you want to think about that too, I'd love to
Yeah.
learn more about.
Yeah. Taylor, you want to start with that?
I know, I don't really know what you mean by that, Michelle. If you could expand on, remind me.
I think it's, it goes along with the seasonality of cooking and cooking within season. But,
Right.
you could pull other things into that as well, like the locality piece and really understanding your specific biome in season. So I don't know if any of you want to expand on that. That's my very limited understanding.
Well, I think, in terms of the cook's perspective, I don't want to eat a raw tomato salad in the middle of January, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that just doesn't feel like it's going to be very satisfying. I'd much rather have a bowl of sweet potato soup or something with a little curry in it, because that's, one of the really wonderful things about living in the Midwest is our appetites are really shaped by the season, and we pay attention to that in a way I think doesn't happen in the southern states or on the West Coast, maybe the southern west part of the coast. And so, that sort of, my appetite kind of forces me to follow the season and pay attention to things like that. So that's one driver. I think that would be one example of phenology. And as people become more attuned to that, then they become more responsive to what actually is available to them in different times of the year, right? It's like, oh my God, the strawberries are in, and then you respond to that. It's like nothing tastes better than a really fresh strawberry that's been ripened on its, on its vine, or a beautiful tomato in August when it's just about ready to split because it's been sitting there in the sun and it's drooping so heavy and it's so loaded with juice. I mean, those are the kinds of things you can really taste the difference if you're eating in season. So I think that's part of it. Yeah. How about you, Rick? You must see that when when people come in to eat, they're probably hungry for what you're cooking because they can smell it when they walk in, right? But also you're responding to what they're going to want.
Not particularly. We don't write the menu based on what people want to. I'll be honest with you, we really don't. We write the menu based on how we feel and how we would like to express ourselves. It just turns out that we haven't been fired for it yet. But
it sounds like it's working for you just fine.
Yeah. So we force seasonality, I guess, on people. Maybe without them knowing too. But I mean, what you're saying is exactly right. And you can even go a little bit further with that. With our preservation program that we have here with ferments and pickling and drying and stuff like that. It's also equally important to get those ingredients at the right time, at the right place. And that way, whatever you do, you're trying to preserve that precise flavor as close to as possible for use later in the year, because this all ties in. We don't have much available to us right now. We're working with grains, we're working with sweet potatoes, we're working with squash potatoes. Might have just hit them all, so it's pretty limited around this time. So it forces us to cook that way, which in turn forces the guests to eat that way, but if there's not a server or one of us out there bridging that gap for them, I could see where it could be lost on people. But there's a big difference between how we eat now and how we were eating pre World Wars, pre highway, pre all these things where the seasonality was life and survival, and now seasonality, though I think we're seeing a return to that, and I think we're seeing a return to people having caring and being considerate of the land around them. I think we're starting to slowly see that come back, and people get in touch with that. However, we still have huge chains, and we still have people shipping trucks full of tomatoes that are not, that are hard, and put them in a bag. That's not really a thing, if flavor was directing how we tasted, I think or how we ate, everything would be seasonal, because they're really, what you're saying is the honest truth is You get a tomato right now, and it's a borderline criminal.
Yeah.
You know, I got one on a sandwich on Tuesday. I went and grabbed a sandwich, and I was just like, "Don't put this garbage on a sandwich. I just don't do it." You know, it's you know, I understand, again, the tight margins some people have to go through, but there's a way to work with these local ingredients while being budget mindful, you know, and there's a way to do these things. You know, it's all about care, consideration, not wasting product, preservation. All of these things are really critical, but you know, that's our goal, is to continue telling the story of the Midwest and to continue, you know, letting people know, hey, like that tomato you're eating right now, it's not cool, man. Like, come hang out with us in August, and like you're saying, we'll show you a whole different world.
Yeah.
And you know, it's something we take serious, and we try to get across to as many guests as possible. So you know, I like I said, I think we're returning to that a little bit, but I'm hoping we're returning to that in an appropriate amount of time.
Well, it's cool because you're showing people what to do with those grains and sweet potatoes, right? And, you know, a lot of people just don't have, you know, that sort of culinary imagination. So you're kind of opening up the possibilities for that. And certainly with, you know, all of these ethnic influences that we're seeing, you know, in restaurants and in home kitchens and in cookbooks and stuff like that, you know, it's, you know, people are using curry or, you know, things that used to be considered exotic, right?
We just hosted a dinner with what is my favorite chef in the city. Her name is Pam Liberta, and she owns and is the head chef at a place called Waldo Thai. And you know, collaborative dinners before for me were just we were just making up menu items and putting a menu together and calling it a day. And this is one of the first times I've actually worked really close with another chef, and we actually took the influences of Northern Thai cuisine and we used it with ingredients that were locally sourced, almost exclusively locally sourced. There were some things on there that were actually Thai ingredients that we brought into it, you know, but it was really interesting. You know, everyone hates talking about money when it comes to doing collaborative dinners and stuff like that. No one wants to talk about, oh, how are we going to split things up?
Yeah.
And she said one of the most profound things to me, and it inspired me because I guess I get so caught up in just like, this is how things are and this is how chefs operate. She said to me, she says, all I want to do is cook the food that I'm familiar with ingredients that I'm not, and ingredients that are sourced locally. And that right there, we were just like, this is going to be a blast. Like, this is so much fun. So, you know, Kansas City is a culturally diverse city, and it kind of always has been. So, you know, I think applying these local ingredients and these indigenous ingredients, these wild ingredients to other cuisines opens up a whole different world that I kind of wish everyone would grasp onto, because it would create such a beautiful culinary scene in Kansas City.
Absolutely.
So, you know, continue pushing the ideas, but, you know, again, it's hard to get people to deviate from their, you know, their course that they're on. So
yeah, no, that's great. That's very cool. Well, that's why it's great to have these other influences coming in, right? Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
And Linda and I got to go to that dinner and it was amazing.
Oh, I bet, you know, okay, so I gotta ask, what did you serve?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Again, I saved the menu.
As stated, my memory stretches back about 3 hours, so
right.
I'll do my best to remember. But what we did is, like, we collaborated on the dishes, so there wasn't like really a dish that was one single person's.
Right.
And, you know, we started with apps and kind of did stuff like that. You know, we did a venison version of lob.
Nice.
Or wait, was that venison? Oh man, or was it?
Right. It was
either way.
Yeah, like you did a game.
Yeah, and we used like Concord grape jam that we made with it, you know. So we kind of like integrated. And I honestly, like, Linda's product, you know, the what they create there, it ends up on all of my menus. And I could probably go through my menu right now and point out like 5 different things that came from, you know, her land. So, you know, it was a lot of stuff like that. It was a lot of concepts that were, you know, from Thai cuisine that we applied the local ingredients to. You know, we did a family style entree scenario. So, you know, that I think that was kind of the deal, as risky as that may have been given the COVID climate, you know, but we also required people to have vaccinations. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you know, it was just a lot. Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything that stood out to you guys, Linda?
Yeah, I was to say Linda or
And they
Taylor.
might remember
yeah.
better than me.
Yeah.
Jump in, Taylor. I saw you heading to the
I was to
microphone.
say, yeah.
Well, as far as what stuck out, the soup was one of my favorites. I recall, I think it was squash and something else. And I was going to say, if Rick or Linda, if you want to touch on fig leaf, because I think that's a great example of
Yeah.
what Rick, you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, fig leaf popped up quite a bit. I use fig leaf as a substitute for coconut flavor because
Okay.
it tastes like it, and it's a lot like blackberry leaves. When you get them young, they have a really nice coconut profile. If you can get around the bitterness of the actual leaves themselves, like especially once they start, you know, once they get past the budding point, they start getting pretty bitter and astringent to a certain point. But those fig leaves, we use it. I'll use it in oils to create, you know, coconut flavors, or I'll just directly integrate it into like purees and stuff like that. So it gets that coconut flavor without actually having to reach out and, you know, get coconuts or use canned coconut milk or anything like that. And it was a pumpkin soup.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a pumpkin
Okay.
soup.
Yeah.
We use the fig leaf oil, but on that dish in particular, we use pickled green peppercorns, which is
Nice.
clearly not from this region, you know, but it also inspired me to find a greenhouse, and I'm going to try to grow peppercorns for myself. So
Oh, that's awesome. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah. So yeah, that's cool. I'm glad you remember that, Taylor.
Yeah.
Well, and fig isn't native here to Missouri, but it will survive.
Mhm.
My figs are outside. They freeze to the ground every winter and come back up and produce more leaves and fruit. But, you know, I use whatever I can get from them. So I'm not a purist about where the plants come from, but
Right.
mostly I want to learn about what's possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I install new things, even annuals, I try to think about using everything about the plant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Leaf, stem, flower, fruit, immature seed, mature seed. So it's really expanding how we can use ingredients.
You know, Linda, that's so interesting. And I'm just curious too, when you're making those decisions, do you reach out to some of the chefs or some of the people that come to your farm or buy your produce to, you know, if they particularly like a particular vegetable or fruit, do you plant more of it intentionally to kind of, you know, does that planning happen around now when you're making decisions about what you're going to do?
Well, it used to pre-COVID.
Mhm.
I actually did chef surveys every winter and said, okay, I have a 3-page product availability list that I keep developing from the history of things here on the farm that may or may not be available that year, but I keep track of them. And I would ask, you know, what worked, what didn't, what would you like to see more of? What can't you get from any other grower?
Right.
I love that challenge.
Right.
And I'm so grateful to Rick for all his creativity. You know, I know it's hard work and it requires more investigation, more independent study and experimentation. And of course, that's all. I love those things. You know, if you forced me to grow in rows, I'd quit. You know, I don't want to do a monocrop, and the food is too beautiful and tastes amazing. You know, it's eating really good food is a fundamental human experience that so many have gotten disconnected from because of the ultra processed convenient stuff.
Yeah. So tell us, Linda, like, where do you go for inspiration then? Do you talk to other farmers? Do you, I mean, certainly you're getting information and feedback from both Taylor and from Rick, but, you know, where else do you go to figure out, you know, again, what you're going to do with the land or how you might change something?
Well, I'm a lifelong learner, so I have an extensive library. I love old textbooks. I have some fruit
Mhm.
books from the
Mhm.
1800s, and
Wow.
I just read a lot of different sources, but I get a lot of inspiration from my space. I try to really observe the plants.
Mhm.
How are they doing? Which ones like where they are?
Mhm.
Frankly, I'm not able to grow some things anymore because of climate change.
Mhm.
I used to grow alpine strawberries. It's too hot.
Wow. Wow.
And last year I had trouble with pineapple sage burning up. I've never had that before.
Mhm.
So it's getting trickier.
Mhm.
And the drought and extreme rain events are
Mhm.
also challenging. So I think being in tune with one's space is going to become more and more critical.
Mhm.
And small scale producers actually can pivot faster than large scale
Right.
because
That's right.
so, there's a lot of pressure to quote scale up,
Mhm.
and I try to scale out into
Mhm.
diversity
Mhm.
because I think that's more sustainable.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And
That's
I can learn more that way. If I'm only growing 3 crops, what am I learning about? But
right.
if I have dozens going and
Right.
they're, finding their best microclimate on my space where they can thrive or won't, then they are informing me always about what direction I should go in. And it's always about flavor.
Yep.
If it
Yep.
doesn't taste good, why would I grow it?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. That's great. Well, being the cook, let's brainstorm what we're going to make everybody for dinner if they were here. All right. And we're just going to go down the line. I mean, Rick, you're going to go last. So we know you're gonna rock it. So we're gonna
No,
put
it's
the
gonna give me
professional
time to
last.
think about it.
All right. Okay. So Taylor, why don't we start with you? Given what 2 or 3 ingredients would you want to play with? And then we'll come up with a meal. How's that?
I'll pick, is there any parameters here? How about beets?
Awesome. All right. So what are you going to do with them?
Oh, I have to say, I thought we were just
Yeah.
going to throw all these to Rick, and at the end, he was going to have to
Nope.
figure it out.
You got to tell us what you're going to do with them.
Oh man, I don't know. Beet soup I'd like to try. I actually bought some beet soup at the farmer's market near me a couple of weeks ago, and it's frozen and I haven't had it yet, but I love soups. So I love
That sounds great.
squash soups.
How are you going to season it? Do you know what you're going to do with it?
Well, I dried some juniper berries and some spice bush this season, so maybe try some of that.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really good. Sounds great.
Just whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. That sounds great. Yeah. Linda, how about you?
Well, I have it on my list to do anyway. I have ground nut. So it's Apios americana, I think.
Mhm.
And I planted it in the wrong place. So it's taking over my back landscape. But I'm okay with that because it loves it there and it hasn't thrived in the other places I've planted it. So it's kind of fascinating. And so I have tubers that I dug before it froze, and I trialed them last year. You have to cook them and peel them, but I think they're actually better than potatoes.
Wow. Okay. And so how are you going to roast them, or what are you going to do with them?
I would boil them, peel them, and then mash them.
Okay. Yum. And what would you put on the mash? How are you going to season the mash? I'm just curious.
Well, to Taylor's point, what's available now is the spice bush. I have dried spice bush, which is Lindera benzoin, I think. And it's one of my new favorite native plants. Almost everything about the plant is edible, and it's beautiful as a landscape plant. And so I have it dried in a grinder. So I grind it on things just to experiment, and it would look pretty on it.
Nice. That sounds great.
Because it's a dark red when it's dried. So on the ground nut, when it's boiled and mashed, is really almost a white.
Okay.
Potatoes have a little yellow hue.
Yeah.
But the ground nut's super white.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds great. This
If
is
I
gonna be-
had sunchokes, I'd do that. But I had the worst crop ever this year, so I didn't get sunchokes.
Was that because of the rain or what was the?
I think it was because of the drought.
Oh, all right. Okay.
It's the worst harvest I've ever had.
Really?
I had large stalks with nothing on the bottom of them. It's very weird.
Wow. Wow.
So that's why diversity is so important,
Right.
because you never know what's going to work which season.
Yeah. 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 Michelle, do you want to chime in? No?
I'm a open a can of beans kind of girl, so eat them cold. I'll let you all
That's
do
all
it.
right. That's all right. I was thinking of beans. Actually, a friend of mine who's a bean grower gave me, or I bought from her some Tarbay beans, those really beautiful, lush white beans. And so I cooked them last night with some sage that I had rescued from my
Mhm.
garden, and some thyme, and some carrots. And then I took the carrots and I roasted them with some preserved tomatoes, and then I thought I'd season them with a little more sage, and maybe even another friend of mine gave me some Staghorn Sumac, maybe a
Mm.
little sumac to make it a little lemony. So we'll see. I mean, I'm just kind of goofing around, right? All right, Rick, we're tossing it to you.
Staghorn Sumac's like one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's great,
I
isn't it?
absolutely adore
Yeah.
almost all sumacs,
Yeah.
with the exception, obviously, of the poisonous one.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you right now. Sweet potato soup is my thing.
Yum.
Sweet potato soup with some pickled rose petals from Linda.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
I
Oh, rose petals, those sound
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, they're naturally hydrophobic, so they
Okay.
actually maintain a decent amount of integrity and will last up to about a year in
Wow.
vinegar. But then also the side, as well as that, you have a whole jar of vinegar as well that
Yeah.
is rose flavored. But
Oh, I bet it's
those,
great. Yeah.
yeah. So those on some sweet potato soup and some cornbread, and I'm sold.
That sounds great.
It
That
seems
sounds
simple,
great.
but I definitely eat much more simple than I cook. So
Yeah. No, that sounds, no, it's, well, then you can really taste everything. And I was also reminded of hazelnuts, right?
I love
Oh, I
hazelnuts.
should do those carrots in hazelnut oil when I sizzle them or roast them, do them in hazelnut oil, right? And then throw some chopped nuts on top.
I
Yeah.
would love
Yeah.
to know if any of you have, well, Beth, you have your cookbooks that we can look at for these types of recipes, but I've never even heard of pickled rose petals,
I haven't
like
either. God, they sound fabulous. Linda, what
Right?
do you like? What do you do? Are they rose hips or rose actual petals?
Petals.
Petals.
Mhm.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
do you
So
have your recipes online or somewhere we can look at also?
It's Rick's secret.
love it.
Pour vinegar over rose petals. Let them sit.
Wow. That's it, huh? God,
All
that
you gotta
sounds,
do.
and so do you get the color of the rose too in the vinegar?
Yeah, actually, yeah. It becomes, and shockingly, you don't lose a lot of it in the actual roses themselves. So you'll actually be able to tell the rose, the pink, the
Yeah.
yellow, the difference in them. But
Wow.
also, yeah, the vinegar turns into this absolutely gorgeous color. Just
God,
like,
that sounds fabulous.
yeah, and it's super simple. It's super
Yeah.
simple.
It's such a great idea. That's such a great idea.
And Rick is able to use the roses because I don't use any synthetic inputs.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
yeah,
know,
that's
my
awesome.
bushes aren't the most beautiful. The flowers are fabulous.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The leaves wouldn't be anything to brag about, but because I don't spray them with anything,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can sprinkle them fresh on a salad, dry them, use them in
Wow.
tea,
Yeah.
and they do smell amazing. They're all heritage varieties. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
God, I bet they're fabulous. That sounds great.
It actually that season intersects just at the right time with strawberries, and so I like to dry things. So you can imagine how our kitchen smells at that. It smells like roses and strawberries, and it's pretty amazing.
Oh, I bet it's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's great. That's great.
Linda
Yeah.
has a whole book of rose recipes. I
You
can't remember
do?
what it's
Yes.
called, but she had a lot this year. They were really healthy. So she sent me home with a bunch and I made rose petal sorbet.
Ooh.
It was delicious and
Oh, that
bright
sounds-
pink naturally.
Oh, I bet. That sounds great.
Yeah, it's how to eat a rose from Jim Long, who's
There you go.
in mid-Missouri. And it's a
Jim
lovely
Long?
little,
Okay, great.
lots of creative things. Rose
Yeah.
petal ice cream. I've served that to a restaurateur once.
Oh, that sounds lovely. That sounds great.
Mhm.
They're also really good fermented with honey.
They are, okay.
Yeah, it
Okay.
makes an amazing honey.
I bet.
Yeah,
Yeah. That sounds wonderful.
they are. It is.
Yeah.
They're the best roses. They're the best flavor. It's
Yeah.
it's my favorite ingredient that's grown here in Kansas City currently.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Wow. I love it. I love it. I mean, it's like a little bit of exotic, Moroccan flavors
Mhm.
come are being
Right.
grown here, right?
Right.
right.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. That's awesome.
I just wanted to open it up. If anyone, Barbara,
Yeah.
Renee, Patricia, if any of you have questions or comments before we end today. I'm now super excited about roses, and
I know,
as
me
a
too.
landscaper, did not love them, but
Right.
I love questions from people.
Okay.
otherwise, I truly appreciate Renee's cooking and listening.
I love that. You go,
a
Renee.
challenge.
I love it. Okay, Renee, what are you cooking?
Yeah.
Oh, what type of sunchoke did Linda grow?
Oh, it's the cream skinned one. I don't remember the variety anymore. I got the tubers before it was BC, before children. So I wasn't even thinking of producing for buyers. So it would have been over 30 years ago I got them. And beware, don't plant them where you don't want them because you'll never get
Oh.
them moved.
Okay.
In fact, they're taking over my raised beds right now,
Oh my goodness.
which would be fine if they produce. So we'll see how that shakes out in the future.
Oh.
But I'm sorry, I don't have the answer about which one. Gosh, I know there's a lot of varieties, but I don't. Maybe I can go back in purchasing history and find the order invoice, but
Mhm.
that'll be a stretch.
All right. Well, we've got 3 minutes left. Do any of you have any sort of closing remarks any last words, Taylor or Rick or Linda?
I would say find someone that you can kind of buddy with in your
Yeah.
neighborhood, in your community. Know what you're putting in your mouth. I see posts about people eating things that aren't edible and
Yeah.
flower photographs with flowers that are not edible on food because they look really pretty. So you want to be conscious of what you're learning about. There's lots of apps that you can use now to take a picture of an item. But I became most empowered when I had a cookbook author chef here, and she wandered my place with me and showed me a lot of things that she was familiar with. It
Yeah.
really helped me. It launched me further and faster.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. Well, that's what relationship building is all about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. All right. And we got a closing remark saying, love the quote from Rick, telling the story of the Midwest through food. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you,
Thanks,
Savannah
everyone.
Institute. This is wonderful. This is great.
thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So
We'll have to.
go
Okay.
get some really good food and cook.
We'll be out to Kansas
Yeah.
City, Savannah Institute Tour 2022.
I love it. That's
Oh
great.
boy,
That's great. All
you're
right.
welcome. Come on over
That's great.
or down, I guess.
Well, Well, have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Be
Take
safe,
care.
stay well.
Thank you.